Welcome into 11 Personnel presented by Monticello Bank. Nick Roush and Adam Luckett here with you after a busy day for the Kentucky football program, and we're here to discuss it all thanks to our friends at Monticello Bank, proud presenting sponsors of 11 Personnel. Enjoy the home court advantage with Monticello Bank. Check out their HELOC special and use the equity you've built in your home to help finance special home projects. My neighbor, they're getting ready to get a deck put in. I know Luckett, he's got something cooking over there. I can smell it. I can smell it all the way from Mount Washington. Go ahead and finance that home project that you've been dreaming of with our friends at Monticello Bank. Check out the HELOC special this month at any one of their 20 locations in 14 counties across the country. You can also check them out at nbcbank.com. They'll take care of you, just like they've taken care of Kentuckians for more than 125 years. Monticello Bank, where people matter. Member FDIC, equal housing lender. Proud presenting sponsors of 11 Personnel. It's Monticello Bank. Mr. Luckett, it's been a whole 3 hours since I've seen you. What's changed? Anything good, bad?
It smells just the Mountain Dew. I mean, that's all that is. You know, our football version of March Madness right now. Like, crazy week.
Yeah.
Crazy week. A lot going on.
They kicked off spring practice, and with the start of spring practice, they also got UK Pro Day in there. So there's a lot of, we haven't talked to these guys in forever, and this might be your last time you get to talk to certain guys. So squeezing a lot in after not a whole lot has been going on for a while, along with championship week coinciding at the same time. And I don't know about you, Luckett, but I like to see some of the basketball. We typically record on Thursdays, but so we know that people are going to be a little bit more locked into the basketball later on the week. So we're going to chat with you some today after a busy day. Were you in charge of dinner tonight? Did you fire up anything for the boys, or was this a pick me up special?
In-laws are in town. Got Henry's first birthday this weekend, so we went and got some pizza. I don't know if you ever had Derby City Pizza. Great thin crust pizza. They got one down here in Mount Washington. So that was the second or third time we've been there. So we went and did that whole thing. Baker had a meltdown. Typical going out to eat experience for the Lucketts.
Yep. If they'd like to sponsor this podcast, they surely can. Formerly known as PRP Pizza, until they got so big they had to do a little rebrand. So, yeah, more you know. Cut from the same cloth. Your St. X Tigers got a big win too. Congrats, Mr. Luckett. You're going to Rupp.
Still undefeated in the state of Kentucky. St. X, no one can beat them. Beat Trinity 3 times this year. That's always sweet. And yeah, they're going to Rupp with the best team. And so we're going to get to see if they can bring home the whole enchilada. First time since 1995. This will be the first basketball state title since like 1965.
If you can win 4 more games.
Well, I thought we were speaking in absolutes. Is that not the case?
I thought Trinity took y'all to overtime in one of those games, right? I think Ballard played close, but still haven't slipped up against a Kentucky team. Pretty impressive. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, too. I know there's a lot of people who are like, St. X good. I mean, they haven't been good in 30 years. And they were always, like, during your heyday, y'all had some pretty good teams. But they were always
okay.
But they were beatable.
I think we had one good team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we had one good team, and like good for us at that time was being like top 4 in the 7th.
Yeah.
Well, it's like getting to the semifinals of the 7th region was like a good year.
Oh, in the 7th region, back when Ballard and J-Town were really rocking, like that was.
Yeah, I mean, well, J-Town was in the 6th.
No,
but
no, that's a new thing. That was when they switched.
Is that right?
Because it used to be East-West. Was the divide, and now it's a north-south divide. So Central moved from the 6th to the 7th, and then we got J-Town in the 6th, which I think is personally kind of stupid.
That's right, because J-Town won it one year. I think J-Town won it my junior year.
That sounds right.
Then my senior year, Ballard lost to Bud Mackey in Scott County.
All-time
20
game.
Beckham and Jovan Hamilton. Yeah.
Yeah, that Ballard team ruled. So that was their junior year. That was okay. That team played in the King of the Bluegrass before us, and watching them play against an out-of-state team, and 20 in Hamilton. I think they dunked 4 of their first 6 buckets, and we were like, how? We're not playing the same sport as those guys.
Pretty sure 20 had a triple-double against St. X that senior year.
He was a baller. He was a baller. Don't let his he had the back injuries he dealt with, and he was pretty good at Mississippi State, and he didn't really ever get to showcase that Kentucky. But Ballard 20, he killed it. He absolutely killed it. But we're not here to spend all our time talking to Sweet 16. Maybe we can do that next week when the action gets started to erupt. But we're here to talk some Kentucky football, where I think for most average fans who I hope our listeners were a little bit more locked in and heard him speak a week or so ago to the media. But this was his first time speaking to such a massive audience on Kentucky Sports Radio. Mark Stoops went on this morning while we were driving up to Pro Day, talking with Matt for about 45 minutes. And on the one side of things, there's a lot of, like if you were going from looking at my job where it's, all right, what's the new thing that he said that we've got to post immediately? The biggest news that I don't think he's ever said publicly before was he does not want to get rid of the Louisville series if they go to 9 games. He wants to keep it. He said it publicly. Look, I think that's for a long time we've operated under the assumption that that's going away if they go to 9 games. But he said it, and I think that's significant.
Yeah, I think, obviously, we'll see what these words mean when push comes to shove. But I think Kentucky as an institution wants to keep that game, but they don't want to go to 9 games. So
yeah,
we'll see what actually happens when they go to 9 games. The kicker in all of that, too, Nick, is what would be this Big Ten alliance that's been floated out.
Yeah.
Because there's thoughts that there will be some type of scheduling partnership. So what does that mean for Kentucky? Mm-hmm. Is that a thing that would affect them at all? If Kentucky drops the Louisville series, is the SEC going to be like, hey, now, you got to play a Big Ten team all the time? Or are they going to be like, you can do whatever you want, but you're still going to play a Big Ten team? Or you're not going to play a Big Ten team every 3 years or so? Like, what does that look like? We still don't know specifics
I could see a scenario where they grandfather in those ACC rivals in lieu of the Big Ten games. So, Georgia could still play Georgia Tech, South Carolina could still play Clemson, Kentucky, and still play Louisville. Meanwhile, all the other teams get tied to a Big Ten team. I could see something like that unfolded, or maybe even if one of the Texas teams plays a Big 12 Texas team, but they basically say you got to play 10 power conference games.
Yeah, my rebuttal to that was whatever they do, Georgia's involved. Like they're not going to have a Big Ten partnership, and the Georgia Bulldogs aren't with Kirby Smart are not going to be playing Michigan or House. Like they're going to be involved somehow. I just don't know what that all looks like. Stoops also kind of acknowledged that in July, assuming House versus NCAA passes, there's going to be a clearinghouse to get NIL done. He didn't say this, but this is what he was alluding to.
Stoops doesn't get into specifics because of the legalese and stuff, but we can go into further detail.
Yeah, basically what he was saying was like how they recruited the last 3 years is supposed to be mostly over now. It's not just here's $800,000. Come throw the football for my school. Mm-hmm. All these deals are going to have to get passed through what is a clearinghouse essentially that the NCAA is going to run. That's part of the settlement. Mm-hmm. Now the settlement's got to get passed, but that is supposed to go into effect in July. Now it's important because if anybody basketball portal wise, because it's going to be real close to, the basketball portal can leak into the summer months. Mm-hmm. And so when that passes, it's going to be important to monitor from that aspect. But from a football lens, like this next portal class, like they're over and they're going to get these next guys in April. But the next portal class, they'll have to run those deals through that clearinghouse. So from that aspect, there is going to be more change, and they're hoping that's like the final, I think, big change.
Well, and then elsewhere, revenue sharing will essentially give each team the same salary cap. If you opt in, you're all playing under the same rules. Now, a school may...
For an athletic department, yes.
Yes. Like one school may give 100% of his money to football and tell everybody else to kick rocks. It will vary based on school to school which sports will get more, but Stoops believes they'll be on the same playing field. And that was something that I thought was important for some fans to hear, where I don't know if he said publicly that Eddie Grand's our GM, even though he does not have the GM title. If you go to UK's website, he's technically special assistant to the head coach. But from a financial dollar allocation, hey, we need X amount of money to go get this many players on the offensive line or this many players from the high school ranks. Like he does the dollars and cents and the fundraising of it. And then the player personnel department, which Chase Heike technically has the GM tag, he leads that up, and that is the group that says, all right, we need this many offensive linemen. Well, we're going to go find 3 or 4 guys we think you can get. And then so they bring that to the coaching staff, and they figure out, all right, here's the guys that we're going to go after. So it wasn't he didn't lay it out in the plainest of terms, but I think he gave folks a little bit of reassurance from a big picture future standpoint on, hey, here's how this big machine is going to work. We aren't hiring Jim Nagy. We aren't bringing in a guy from the NFL to do it, but we are going to operate somewhat similarly to how these other organizations work with an off-field staff and an on-field staff.
Yeah, basically we're not making any big changes in that regard. That's how that system's been running for the last 4-ish years.
Mm-hmm. But they've been very shy about what exactly they do over there. They don't want to say it's Fort Knox, right? Top secret,
right. Sure.
state secrets. Can't let anybody get out. But he at least made that clear, and he gave a nice impassioned. I don't like getting my ass kicked. We're gonna go back. You could tell he kind of. He kind of knew where he wanted to go with that, and then at one point, almost Michael Scotted it, where he was like just so kind of excited and emotional. But I think he conveyed the message that he wanted to get across, which is that he was kind of a kick dog who's ready to bite the hand that hit him.
Yeah, that I think that's the quote that stands out, and to me, that's the acknowledgement of that he hears the noise. Right? They say they don't listen, don't read. But that's the acknowledgement. You go to KS Board. It's a overarching complaint, I think, from the fan base that they feel that Stoops is tapped out. They feel like he had one foot out the door. Mm-hmm. And they feel like some people feel that he's just collecting the checks in a way. So to me, that was an acknowledgement that he's hearing that and trying to show that he is invested right now.
Yeah.
And then another thing that stands out, and then I want to ask you a question. Another thing that stands out to me was I think the criticism he got for the Wilcox shoelace gate, I think that really got to him. Because he keeps talking about not wanting to speak in specifics, and he took it on the chin. I think he really... Because that was the one that blown up the most, to me.
Yes.
Like, that was the one that kind of went viral. And it did... I don't even know if... I don't remember it getting picked up by national college football. I mean, I could be wrong.
SEC,
but here it was a big deal.
And like SEC Mikes of the world, and there were some, but it was huge in our spheres.
Yeah. So that was,
and to take it further too, is he's pretty protective of Jamarian.
Yeah.
Because Jamarian's got a very difficult home situation, and Kentucky was recruiting him, and then they fired the running backs coach, and they hadn't really hired Jay Bolwer yet. Stoops did a lot of the legwork to get him here. Mm-hmm. So what you heard from him in that moment was his frustrations in that the light wasn't coming on quicker for Jamarian. So the fact that that kid got beat up a lot over it, I think really frustrated him. But at the same time, there's also not wanting to get into specifics, some of it is it does him no good to give the Wolves the meat to chew on. And, Stoops wants to, I think people want to hear Stoops say that, X, Y, and Z stunk, right? Because he's not going to throw his guys under the bus and say that his most talented players were not the leaders they needed them to be last year. They invested in guys, and they got a bad return on investment. That's not the full story, but that's a lot of it, And when he says words like, you need better leadership and more accountability, that's his thinly veiled way of saying it in broad strokes. So I don't expect him, because it does him no good. He still has good relationships with those players. I mean, Dane Key was FaceTiming in to watch the pro day today, right? They still have decent relationships, even though things went sour. And then, as we'll talk about with Deone Walker, things didn't go according to plan for him because of the injury he was dealt with. So, as much as some people wanted him to go on KSR and take the Game of Thrones walk of shame and just there's a certain line that he can't cross, because it does him absolutely no good whatsoever.
Yeah, before I get to my question, I think it was interesting. He pointed out the Vanderbilt game. Some of his best players didn't make plays they normally make. Everyone remembers the Dane Key fumble.
Mm-hmm.
But on that opening drive where Vandy goes 98 yards or whatever, after the Dane Key penalty,
mm-hmm.
I believe Jamon Dumas-Johnson gets a roughing the passer call.
Yeah.
That if he doesn't get, Kentucky gets off the field. So there were some plays there that Kentucky players didn't make, and it was just frustrating. And then I thought his comments on combined with Bush Hamden and the offensive line were interesting. When did you realize you were in deep trouble? It's South Carolina game. I think that's when everyone kind of realized it. And then, then he talked about how it put Hamden in a tough spot, and he seems like he was kind of alluding to that there was some stuff he could have adjusted better in, and maybe, he talked about this on Monday too, about how now he's got the experience and that he thinks that's going to help, and mentions the continuity.
Mm-hmm.
But that was interesting. I think it was just they were just owning up to the fact that they were just not, personnel-wise and coaching-wise, they just were not prepared. Or, I don't know if prepared is the right word, but they just didn't have the answers to the test. For all season, for probably a multitude of reasons, in the offensive line kind of started that all. But
which brings us to a good, not question, a good point in the chat. We've also got a question in the chat we need to get to. I think your question might have to revolve around this, Luckett. And it's our friend Walker Yaw. He's on KS Board. You should be on KS Board too, because promo code UK1, you can check us out for a couple months for only $1. We got a March Madness sale going on too. A lot happening. We appreciate if you all join us over there. And this is the best counter to anything glowing I can say about the players they brought in this year. And Walker said, my biggest worry this year is the thing that happened to last year's Oklahoma offensive line happens to us. I think if you weren't following along Oklahoma closely, they had a similar situation where they couldn't stop.
They had injuries.
Yes.
On offensive line, but they poured on an offensive line and it blew up in their face. And they've had an established offensive line coach.
Yeah,
Bill Bedenbaugh.
Yeah, that guy's their Charmin, and I mean he's been there 15 years, something like that. He's been there forever,
like a decade. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, I think if I was going to do any sort of difference, is that Kentucky did that last year. They made the portal goofs a year ago, and they've adjusted. And I think the biggest adjustment is that if Gerald Mincy hurts or stinks, they have somebody that can play there at right tackle still. They were kind of SOL last year, which was what happened with Oklahoma. They were just playing true freshmen because they didn't have anybody. Whereas with Wallace, Unamba as a depth piece, if you had to, Darren Stroud, I just mentioned true freshman, then I mentioned another one, but it's mostly because my tackles aren't coming to mind right now. But like you have one injury won't kill you, or two you can even probably patchwork together, and I would say that they're also doing something differently than what they've done in the past when they approach their portal offensive lineman hulls, because they're getting 3-year starters all over the place.
Yeah, first off, Stoops talked about depth and how they just didn't have enough depth. And then Deone Walker talked about it today, how he felt injuries really set them back. And we could go back to this time last year in spring ball. They had all these defensive line injuries. Offensive line just didn't have the depth because the recruiting simply wasn't good enough. I mean, we could talk this, and they caught some bad breaks with some injuries. So they feel, I think they're probably in a better spot there, and that's ultimately why Eric Wolford is still here. Like, that's ultimately why he's here, is to help build a roster. But I think some of the criticism is valid in that does Kentucky, do you feel good about them as a whole, as an evaluation staff, as bringing guys in and it really working and fitting these needs? Now, part of the reason it's hard to grade them on that is because they have new offensive coaches every year. So we haven't really even seen them really evaluate and fit needs. We've seen them do it on defense, and I think overall on defense it's been good. But offensively, it's been so much change. We just don't know. Like, you can't even answer that question. So, like, this is a big year. Like, it's a big year obviously for Wolford, because he's, that's a lot of new bodies he's bringing in, and you need it to work. If it doesn't work, this whole thing is
cooked.
Effed, yeah. And for Bush Hamden, this is this is a make or break year for him, I think, at Kentucky, obviously. But also for him, like, you kind of look at his career, like, if this doesn't work for him, where does he go, right?
Yeah. Is he back to being a receivers coach? Or is he assistant NFL position coach again? I mean,
yeah, so this is it's a huge year, I think, for him, and they've got, like, their fingerprints are on this offensive roster. Like, all over it. They literally, they've handpicked pretty much their starters. Like, you could go down, and they, even like a guy like Jalen Farmer, like, they pretty much handpicked this entire, together, they've handpicked the entire offensive roster. So it's got to work in some, I'm not saying they got to be top 25 offense, but it's got to work, and they've got to be effective. So it's a big year in that regard. But I get some of the skepticism because, like, a lot of the offensive issues we're talking about are this, they keep the same issues.
Yeah. Rinse, recycle, repeat.
Right. So how do you fix that and all that? So it's very complicated schedule stuff. We know all of that. But again, I think Stoops in his kind of messaging this week, I think he's doing a good job acknowledging what's happening but he's not going into specifics about what were the discipline issues. Did they have a culture problem inside the locker room? Like, what were the accountability? Like, what was the accountability? He's not going on record for that, and so I think they're just trying to move forward and reset kind of that culture. What I'm most curious about is this come to Jesus meeting he had with his staff.
The retreat.
He had it at a remote location in a round table. Like, who? Like, what lake house? Who? What person's lake house has a remote? Because that's where this happened, right? It was at someone's lake house. So who has a round table in their lake house?
I would like to think that they went.
Did they rent out Mitch's cabin? He's got the farm somewhere. Did they rent out Mitch's farm for a weekend?
I'd like to think they went to Lure Lodge in Jamestown, Lake Cumberland State Park, and they just cleared out the buffet room. And they had the food out there, had somebody serving them drinks, and they just pounded on the table at the Kentucky State Park. And I can assure you there were some candid conversations there because you know how it is like it. These assistant coaches, things can get political. So I'm sure there was some back and forth there on some finger pointing. But hopefully that was a productive meeting. And they were able to come away with what seems like at least a plan that Stoops is confident in, that they can get back to the kind of style of play that Kentucky fans can be proud of. And that gets back to our guy Sterling's question. He said, "Do the players perform with Mark's fire?" And we're not idiots. Like, there's a standard here that's been set. The standard is the standard, as my good friend Mike Tomlin likes to say. But that standard was a hard-nosed physical football team that, they might be deficient in talent, but like on the rarest of occasion were they going to embarrass you because they weren't just playing hard and grinding and straining. And it felt like, especially in that Auburn game, and really a lot of the run defense later in the season, there was just a lot of quit. And that was the most disheartening part about last season. And to answer that question is difficult because, how much interaction have we had with these guys? We haven't had a ton. In the limited roles, they seem like the kind of guys that it's the Luke Fortners, but like instead of them being 2-star recruits that you found and you developed over 5 years, like they just went to Bowling Green or they just were at a different small school and that's their development track, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Josh Braun wearing the same number as Eli Cox just feels perfect. They're very similar in a lot of ways. They're articulate. They're married old men who already have a degree, maybe 2, under their belt. So I think from a personality standpoint, this team has more of the personality that an old school Mark Stoops team would have. Whereas, no offense to some of the recent personalities, but they went all in on the talent, and the talent didn't act like the old hard-nosed salty dogs of the past. So I think these guys are the same cut of Stoops' jib, but like it's very early, and we've got a spring practice and a fall camp to try to figure out if they will perform with that same fire to raise the floor, because the floor just bottomed out for the Cats last year.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think they're betting on right experience. They're betting on, I think, like volume, line of scrimmage. I mean, we don't get to see the dollar figures on some of these guys, but I think a good percentage of their available money to spend was spent guys playing like on the offensive line or in the front 7 on defense. Like that's where a lot of their resources went. So they're fixing it that way. I think it's fair to question, like, okay, like, are you going to be able to be good enough to play that the Stoop style of ball and win games against this schedule? I think that's a fair thing to wonder. Like, what's the ceiling? And But I think one of the biggest things this year, Nick, is like they've got to get back to playing. Well, I keep talking about it, but they've got to get back to playing a certain way, like that they didn't play, like, and that's not hard to see, like playing with their hair on fire. A team that plays for each other, a team that plays hard, a team that suits football, that's physical, and it's gonna make you like the other team. Like being a fist fight, like how they played against Ole Miss and Georgia. But like doing that against more than just 2 teams, right? Like doing that against a lot of teams on your schedule. And so we'll have to see. There's a lot of moving parts. Can they get all of these parts together, working together in unison? They, again, can injuries stay away in some key positions? Because injuries were... Like, you go through that defense, like, look who was out there against Tennessee, right? Like, that was a huge deal for them. But still, that doesn't answer, like, the effort level we saw against Louisville, which was something I think he kind of acknowledged, like, how serious they take that game. And they came out and played like that. And so, we'll see. Again, back to that meeting, I would just like to have been a fly on the wall in that room. And I would like to have known where it was at and like what was the food setup. What was it, an overnight retreat? And I would like to know more details about this kind of retreat with this circular table.
That it was overnight, so once the circular table talk happens, they can pour some cocktails and get to the fun, kind of like laid back. Because you don't. It's like peak leaving the arena. You got to leave on a make, right? You can't leave on bad terms. You can't go to bed mad. So, could be fun. Be a lot of fun. I think I wanted to clear some up for nobody, who just asked what is the authority that Stoops talked about with nil in July. There was a report that came out from Ross Dellinger long story short, Mitch Barnhart's on it. It's got 2 people from every power conference, but they're getting admins. There'll be 10, 12 people that serve as the police for all of this, and Mitch Barnhart's going to be one of them.
Yeah. Right in the wheelhouse for Mitch.
We're getting an NIL police is going to be coming to college football.
A clearinghouse. It's a clearinghouse for NIL deals.
Yes.
It's to make it's essentially to make sure it's not just
Tennessee.
Pay for play. So much pay for play going on. Because they're going to have salaries with the university.
Exactly. You know what is coming down the pike though is the game day gear over at Roback, RHOBACK.com. Roback, they've got the best gear on the market, the best game day gear. The new UK collection is sharp. They've got the Rupp Arena pattern on the polo. They've got the super soft hoodies. They've got plenty of other stuff too if you don't want to just get the UK game day collection. But it's a great way to gear up ahead of March Madness. Go to Roback.com. Check out all their comfort polos, shirts, hoodies, Q-zips, jumpsuits, whatever it may be. They've got stuff for the ladies too. Joggers, skirts. I think I even saw on their website that they have pickleball. Are you a pickleballer, Mr. Luckett?
I have never pickleballed.
I've never pickleballed either, but I bet I'd look good and feel good with our friends at Roback, where you're going to get 20% off your first purchase at Roback.com and use promo code KSR. That's promo code KSR at Roback.com for 20% off your first purchase at RHOBACK.com. Luckett, what was your favorite part of Pro Day? What do you think was the most? If you had to say, okay, this is the biggest takeaway from Pro Day, what would it be?
Yeah, I just think Jamon Dumas-Johnson really had a really nice day. Good, very good time in the 40. Great jump numbers from the vertical, broad jump. He looked like he shed some weight. I think he had a really good day. I think he helped himself. So he would be. So you add that with him and Eli Cox and Maxwell Harrison. I think you've got 3 Kentucky players. I think at the pre-draft process that have really kind of they got to the plate and hit extra base knocks, right? Whether it was home run, double, triple, they really. I think all 3 of those guys really helped themselves. And I think they're, Max has got a chance to go in the first round, where Eli Cox maybe moved in the 6th or 5th round territory, and I think Jamon Dumas-Johnson was probably maybe a later half day 3 pick. Now I think he could be moving that first half, where maybe he could sneak into the 4th, the 5th. So I think he was a big winner of this event.
Yeah, I was shocked when he jumped. I really was, because he always struck me too as a grown man strength kind of guy, not necessarily a great athletic testing type of dude. So didn't know he had that in him, but I almost certainly think he will be picked. But my answer is actually just not what we saw, but what we heard in the interviews talking with Deone Walker, because he had alluded, we heard about a back injury. I mean, it's technically he was playing with a broken back. I mean, it's not like, my back's broken, I'm paralyzed. But he has what is called a pars defect. And whenever I got it, when I was 17 years old, a junior in high school, they called it spondylosis. Pars defect sounds way cooler than spondylosis. But it's essentially the little wings on your vertebra of your back. You just get a fracture in it. And it's funny because Uncle Cousin Jeff over at U of L, he had something similar when he was playing. And I remember talking to him about it. And the thing about it that sucked the most is you would have days where you would wake up and you'd feel pretty good. And like, okay, well, yeah, I could play football. Especially, I was a defensive line guy too. Like, oh, I just got to get in a stance and fire off. And like, if you keep your back straight, you could play through this. That'd be fine. But then you could wake up and not be able to get out of bed. And like the whole, like, no, I can't tie my shoes. Like, it can be that painful. It sucks. And like, I did one game with it, and I was just like, nope, this is not happening. No chance in France. And like 6-8 weeks later, I was back to playing basketball. I mean, it took me a while to get back to somewhat normal, and it's still something like he'll deal with it he's gonna have back issues for forever. He said he feels pretty good now, but I credit to him for just playing through it. We even asked him, did you ever think about not doing it? He was like, no, because I didn't want people to think that I just didn't play like I was quitting for the wrong reasons. Like all my other teammates, they were pretty hurt too. And I know I wasn't at my best, but I was still going to go out there and play. So I commend him for it. And it also it makes sense why there were times where we saw Deone seemingly like limping off the field, walking slowly. It wasn't because he was he was pretty injured. So a hat tip to him. Fortunately, Luckett, he seems to be good now. You get that time off, you'll heal up pretty fast. It might be something that bites him, a week, a year, maybe, unless he just like completely re-injures it. But I don't think, if it healed right, I don't think the medical is going to be like, oh, we can't draft this guy. So and you know what? It might do him some favors to explain why the production wasn't what it was.
Yeah, and I think he kind of alluded to that about like, he kind of said the junior year was what it was. I put on tape what I put on tape. It wasn't my standard or my expectation, but trying to stress like the sophomore tape you're seeing as the player you're getting. I was dealing with an injury last year. And so he's got to sell kind of scouts on that. I mean, it kind of makes the fall and kind of what we saw from him last year. It makes sense. Like it adds up more. And then I did think I talked about this earlier, but he did kind of mention the injuries as a whole. He thought really affected the defense, like Max Hairston,
D-Jack
missed time. Derek Jackson, he was playing through an injury. The bunch of defensive line injuries. I think he said Trevon Ripka had an injury. I believe he mentioned him at one point. Was that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so like,
that
was a factor for them.
At every single level of the defense had some sort of
right. Like DJ Waller, their second and third. They're the third and fourth corners. DJ Waller and Tarian Nichols. Like they each missed like the last 4 games for whatever. I think Nichols had a shoulder. I'm not sure what Waller's exact injury was. So it was just like they just had a lot of stuff they dealt with injury-wise, specifically on defense. And then I think offensive line, there's been talk about how maybe Marcus Cox wasn't 100%. Mincy got hurt. And so it was even on offense as well, the injury issues. And so that's something they've got to hope that they can get fixed and it's not that big of an issue. Because we talked about it during the season, like on these injury reports. It's like, well, Kentucky, it was like Delman, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss, but there was felt like some funny business going on with Ole Miss. Yeah. But it's like, this seems like they have a lot more injuries than the rest of this conference. Yeah. So what's going on here?
It adds up. I felt bad because Octavius Oxendine was like halfway through the bench and he had something happen to his pec. And he ended up putting something on it and still running and doing all the drills. But it's like, I mean, it's always something, It really is. And so that was unfortunate. But, Pro Day's kind of fun, though, to get out there, see those guys, even if it wasn't the most star-studded event. Like, you didn't have a bunch of receivers. There's no Will Levis quarterback out there competing. But guys come back. We got to speak with Ray Davis. That's going to be coming out on the KSR YouTube channel later on. I had my stopwatch out, Luckett, and was putting that to work. So hopefully we'll make a fun video out of that. What was funny is when I got home, my kids, they wanted to play stopwatch. So I went from timing future potential NFL players on the stopwatch to my children running from one room to the next. Which, hey, under 2.5 from the playroom to the couch, like that's pretty impressive. There's a lot of explosiveness out there. We got to get the form down.
Short area burst there.
We got to work on our get off a little bit. You know, sometimes they just pop straight up, right? You got to work on those aerodynamics, come out low and hard. But all in all, doing all right. We appreciate our guy Sterling Wash over here, who keeps chiming in with the super chat. You know, he just wants to know why the young men aren't playing as hard all the time, like the game against Georgia, and I totally get it. I also think it's smart, Sterling Wash pressure washing, for that to, like, you're kind of doing some viral advertising here. I appreciate your hustle, and I'm sure you got a great side hustle with your pressure washing gig. I know there's probably some people
pressure washing season right now.
Oh, I know, and I've got, like, I'm looking at the pressure washing job I'm staring down the barrel at, and the one on my porch. I'm just not looking forward to it, but it's coming right around the corner. So I'm sure old Sterling will take care of you. But that sounds like a pretty sweet side gig. And if you're looking for a side gig, check out Andy Luedeke, myperfectfranchise.net. He's partnering with 11 Personnel to let people know that you don't have to be stuck in your same rut with My Perfect Franchise. His franchising consulting expertise can help you find the field that you're looking for to freshen things up. You know, maybe it is pressure washing. Maybe it's something else, fast food, youth sports, to whatever it may be, home improvement. There's so many different franchising opportunities out there that Andy can connect you with. He'll work with you, and the best part is that his services are 100% free. If you got any questions about business ownership, Andy will take your call at 404-973-9901. You can also email him, Andy@myperfectfranchise.net. That's myperfectfranchise.net. Chat with Andy Luedeke to get out of your rut today. Got another great question here. Any Freddie Maggard updates? I'm planning on grabbing some lunch with him when spring ball, like during all this madness. So, but this first week, look, it was a real damn. All the stuff's on the schedule at the same time. Like,
yeah.
Kind of hit hard. So there's a little bit of a scramble drill for a little bit there, but you know, we picked up the pieces. We're doing all right. We're figuring it out. But looking forward to catching up with Freddie, who #1 South Dakota State Jackrabbits fan out there right now.
Their quarterback will be the starting quarterback at Iowa this year, Mark Gronowski.
You gonna throw it around the yard a little, fire it up. They were over machine last year.
I know,
a big time over machine. We don't get I know Mark Stoops is going to want to be light on specifics. But there's always one guy we end up talking about more in spring practice, even if it's unjustifiably so. So yeah. Who's going to be the hot name that we're talking about in spring practice?
I like that you brought this up because I wrote a KSR Plus column on this today. Go and check us out. We've got a new sale up and running. Get I think 1 week for $1.
Yeah, it's I think after that it's 50% off a year.
Yeah, so there you go. So, take the plunge with us right now. This is a fun time on the board. Like, we've had a lot of fun with the NFL free agency going on. Like, we've got my Bengals off-season thread, which is like in my absolute wheelhouse. So we're having a lot of fun firing off Mike Brown takes. So that has been fun.
About when you basically all the money that he's pissing away about not just signing people early on. I'm
counting down the minutes until Aaron Rodgers signs with the Steelers, so I can just have a message board party about that and let the memes fly in there. So come and join us, and all the basketball stuff. Like, we'll have our threads for obviously all the Kentucky stuff, but like everything else going on too.
And then you go into Portal from right after that too.
Right. Yeah, and that's you definitely need to be locked on for that. Not only basketball portal, we got football portal around the corner too.
Jacob's already looking at portal guys for basketball potential fits for Kentucky. So
Yeah, it opens in 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure the 25th is the first portal day for college basketball.
crazy, crazy. But yeah, so back to my original question: Who's going to be the guy we're talking about at the end of spring practice?
I think Quay Scott here, Nick, is a very, very good candidate.
That's a great candidate, especially for because like Jansen Dunn was the guy last year, and he didn't play. I mean, he played, but he wasn't. He was just fine. But he was the spring star that just kind of fizzled a little. There wasn't a
Right.
whole lot to that, and I could see Quay Scott being the guy, but also not being like a star for the Kentucky defense this fall, but playing an important role.
Yeah, I think you go back to Mark Stoops, not getting into specifics, but pretty much acknowledging they felt good about where they are in the secondary, specifically at safety and nickel. Like, to me, they need a nickel. They didn't take one. Like, he could be it for them. So he's one I'm watching. And he burned his red shirt last year, and they played him. They kind of special teams and then played him outside corner some. I believe they played him at nickel some against Murray State. So he's a guy I definitely think to watch. And a lot of 2024 guys popped up on this. Like Steven Souls Jr., right? He feels like a candidate. Like how do they use him? Willie Rodriguez, it seems like he's headed towards a big role. Torian Nichols. They need, just in general, they need young stars to emerge because like a lot of these portal guys are out after this year. So you got to have building blocks for your team going into next year. And these 2024 guys should be that going into year 3. So a lot of 2024 guys on this list.
My name for this is a portal player who every person I've talked to about the defensive line, it's like, oh yeah, David Gusta. First, very fun to say his name. Secondly, he's a productive player from a power conference that brings some explosiveness to the interior of the defensive line. I think he's going to be, and why he's great to be the spring breakout guy too, is because similarly, having a breakout interior defensive lineman isn't necessarily the star of the team on Saturdays either, right? Like they're eating gaps, biting kneecaps, spit and dip, gouging eyeballs. Like they're doing the dirty work that necessarily doesn't get all the shine. So I think he can become a well thought of, highly regarded player around the team that maybe not necessarily gets all of the success, but they'll want to prop up some because of just the abilities he shows in these early practices this spring.
Yeah, I think obviously I think that was one. I think if we've got if we got the spreadsheet, the money spreadsheet, I think he would be one of the higher dollar figures on there. I think
so.
There were some SEC schools involved. He was a very popular guy. Entered the portal, defensive lineman, typically high dollar players. He was one of the best ones that become available, and so yeah, I think the expectations are fairly high for him this season.
Quickly to plug an article I wrote that might have gone by the wayside, just because I know everybody's locked into basketball right now. Totally get it, but all 3 of these defensive linemen have just crazy stories. Gusta was on a great team and a productive player. I mean, they had a lot of talent, but it just conference realignment ripped Washington State apart. And so he got pretty candid when discussing that. His story, fascinating. McKeese Grace was a 5'9" safety as a sophomore at Princeton High School. A 5'9" safety who grew up to be a 6'4" Missouri Valley Conference Defensive Player of the Year. He didn't play defensive end until his senior year of high school. So he's got 4 years of the position experience, period, in his life. One of those was a redshirt season at an FCS school. So that just is like, all right, Brad, go cook. go show that guy the ropes. And then the one that I was just most taken aback by all of them, Jaden Williams. You were the one who spoke to him, and when he was talking about his mother being his inspiration, she passed away right as his senior year of high school was starting, and I mean, just died suddenly from a brain aneurysm. There's a great LA Times profile on it, like that was contemporary, where like it really details the heartbreak that he was going through. Um, but for him, he used it as a light switch, like a motivational. Like he he wasn't very focused, and his high school coach said it was like an overnight transformation. Like the dude took a day off and was just like, all right, well, I've got to make my mom proud. I'm going to work my ass off, and I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a degree, and I'm going to be a college football player. And I'm so impressed by that young man because I would be the exact opposite. I would not react that way. I do not have the testicular fortitude to turn that trauma into such a good. So, fascinating characters we have on that defensive line. Some big guys who I'm excited to get to see. I'm hopeful that they'll open up a couple practices for the public later on. But the schedule as of right now, Luckett, they're doing Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. But next week's spring break. So next week's completely off. This is the, what do they call it? The integration period where, like, you got to do helmets and then shell. Like, you can't really hit for the first 3 or 4 practices anyway. So
Yeah, they're going.
Get them out of the
Yeah,
way.
they're going. I think Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week, and then they got spring break,
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
and then they
That's that
start
week.
the Tuesday, Thursday, or Thursday, whatever it
Wednesday,
is.
Friday, Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Monday,
so
Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. So we'll have a 3-week sprint after the first round of the NCAA tournament. Hopefully, everybody is still cheering the Cats on in the Sweet 16 and is they're a little distracted from spring football. But we're happy to talk football whenever here on 11 Personnel. We would have loved to have talked to you a little bit earlier. We might have had a little bit more gas in the tank, but the internet wasn't interneting at the old KS office, unfortunately. Oh, hey, it's Matty G. Better late than never, Matt. Sorry, you probably got thrown off by our timing today, so I'm not gonna bust your chops too hard on the YouTube chat, but we appreciate everybody for joining. One final thing, Luckett. We should talk about what's happening over at U of L. Why are you sending all of your players to Louisville, Luckett? We opened the show with St. X. We're closing with X. Why are you sending all your St. X Tigers? I thought you were supposed to be the recruiter for the Cats, getting Tiger Tech to Titletown in Lexington, and said you're sending them to Floyd Street. What the hell?
the Trinity coach just finally realized, like, oh, this is the way to go. This is the path. Let me recruit some more St. X guys.
He had to extend the olive branch, but it is fascinating where they went from never recruiting high school to just being like, all right, we will recruit high school, but we're gonna just try to get everybody on board by
Yeah, I
April.
mean, Louisville had. I mean, we want to be real blunt about this. They had to pay to keep some players on the team this year. Those 2 tailbacks,
Yep,
Chris Bell.
yep.
I'm sure there were some other guys. Like they had to pay to keep. I think some high school recruits that they've gotten and developed. They had to pay
Yep.
to keep them, so maybe they didn't have the resources that they usually had in the portal. I'm sure Miller Moss was not cheap.
Yep. And
Sure,
they
that
take
cost a
big
lot of
chunk
money
change.
to get him, and so I think you're seeing some of that philosophy to switch. And overall, like the super senior era is almost like it's pretty much done. So these markets you're shopping in are going to be less bountiful than I think they were these last couple years.
Mm-hmm.
And I think teams are realizing like player retention is really important. Player retention can be cheaper than having to go out and be in this market and get caught in negotiations at sometimes. That's what happens in free agency. Like, I mean, you look at it like some of these
Yeah.
guards are getting paid ridiculous amount right now, even though the guard class is not great. The left tackles are gotten paid, even though these left tackles are not great. Like Dan Moore from the Steelers was just, probably an average left tackle.
Yeah.
Titans paid him $82 million over 5 years, like $50 million guaranteed. Like they're getting over. You can overpay if you get into a free agency situation, which is the portal for college football.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think teams are realizing the value in that, keeping your good players in house. Now Kentucky, it's a little different this year because I think they thought to themselves they just needed a reboot and they got a reset.
Yeah.
And so, but I think moving forward, I don't think that's what they want to do every year.
No, I don't think so either.
Now, with that said, they have to pick it up recruiting wise, and we're gonna get into this later. But they're off to like one of the slowest starts I think they've ever gotten off to. They saw 2 targets go to Louisville here recently. It's hard to see. Like Jarvis Strickland is a guy like I'm watching closely, and they got to OV scheduled, but it's hard to see like who would you like if I was gonna do a mock class. Like I don't know who to put on. Like I'd have a hard time putting names on there.
Do you want some breaking recruiting news that I learned today, Luckett?
Sure, why not?
What's his name? Hold up. It's not an OV though, unfortunately. But they are getting a kid who's OV into Florida to come up. Is it Billy Williams Jr.? Is that sound right? Brian Williams Jr., the son of Brian Williams, MSNBC. No, just kidding. But yeah, he's coming up here in a couple weeks. So there you go. There's a player. We have a lot of official visits locked in, but like you said, Lockett, I mean, one of those official visits that got locked in is committed to Louisville. So I don't. And here's the other part too is, personally, I'm kind of slow playing it because I don't. I feel like a lot's riding on this year, and I know they need to do something next year, but a lot of it was just getting their ducks in a row for the now, and to be able to recruit at the high school ranks. They kind of got to prove it to the high school kids as well. So
yeah, I feel like again, like we've talked about this obviously, but it's gonna be just a slow.
Yeah,
I think that there's a level of sell and prove that they have to go out and show.
Oh, and if they don't, and here's the other part too, if you take too many guys too early, and then you could outperform the guys you take. So it's a fine balancing act, but I do think Kentucky. You mentioned it earlier. It's a slow drip, but you're going to need at least one body, a warm body in there sometime soon. So it'd be nice to see that happen sometime during this spring season when they're hosting kids on campuses. I saw a big 27er kid was just in town. So we're going to get more and more coming in and out as they hit the road for unofficial visits throughout spring practice. We'll try to keep our best to keep you updated on KS Sports. That sounds like a great thread to start, but I feel so behind because I've been – just today, I feel so behind. So I need to go play catch up, do some work, write some blogs. But it's been fun chatting with all of you. Wow, my brain I don't know what happened there. Did somebody just cut down the nets? We get another conference tournament championship?
Yeah, you need to go see St. Francis. You need to go see their mascot. Go look at the Field of 68 tweet from 8 minutes ago, and Mike Rutherford also had a tweet of the mascot. You need to see this mascot. Everyone do it right now in the chat.
Okay. I'm very excited. I gave away a pick for Delaware money line, and they're like it's close. They're 8.5 point dogs. They're down by 2 points. Let's go, Blue Hens. Let's see. I gotta find this tweet. You want to talk like it while I find this tweet?
Yeah, so Nick Roush, if you don't listen, gives out picks. He's chasing Big Cat, trying to get 16 in a row. Probably will never get there.
Oh, man, my picks have been so bad.
It reminded me of the ESPN The Streak, the Big Cat thing. Do you remember that? Did you ever play The Streak on ESPN?
And it was a little annoying because it was I did not like some of the parameters they had.
Yeah, they would have like only a couple games, and you could pick like over under points and
yes.
You didn't have much of a board. There he is. Look at that guy.
What in the world is that?
They're the St. Francis Red Flash. So that's Mr. Red Flash right there.
Oh gosh.
Someone said it looks like the Providence Friar, just like on some stuff.
So he's technically Frankie the Friar. Technically.
Yeah, I wouldn't mess with old Frankie. He looked like he'd chap your ass, my boy.
Man, I love that we get the bald guy doing granny shot free throws, and now we got the bald Friar crazy mascot. So, great start to March Madness. I'm looking forward to it. Make sure you're locked in. Peak is heading down tomorrow with Jack and Zach. They're going to have a ton of content. Pope speaking early tomorrow morning. Hopefully they're there for a very long weekend in Nashville. We'll be back next week to talk some football or whatever we want to talk about. Because we love hanging out with you here on the KSR YouTube channel. For Adam Luckett, I'm Nick Roush. This has been 11 Personnel.